This week on the other side, our Queensland election special wrap-up at the end of this week's show. If you're watching after Sunday, you'll already probably know the result. But before we get to all of that, the Greens' finest moment as the woman that they brought into our federal Senate really goes one step too far. Lydia Thorpe's appalling behaviour with the King. The Greens will say, oh, but she's not in our party anymore. Yeah, but she was your deputy leader in the Senate and you brought her to us, so you don't get off that easily. The old right Conservatives gathered in Sydney for a big powwow this week. Howard, Abbott, ScoMo and Costello were all there, joining a lineup of the right's elites. JORDAN Peterson beamed in on Zoom. We'll bring you our thoughts on that and discuss some highlights. Dan Andrews makes a Commonwealth Games appearance in Glasgow. Well, sort of. We'll explain that later. A posh all-girls Melbourne Christian high school tries to explain its appalling decision not to allow students to wear a crucifix necklace, but just digs a deeper hole for itself. And Bruce LEHRMANN has a little win in court. This is The Other Side. G'day Brisbane, g'day Port Pirie, g'day Australia. This is episode 333 of The Other Side for the weekend commencing Friday, October 25, 2024. I'm Damien Curry. The Other Side is your weekly analysis of the best news and commentary to get you smart for the weekend and the week ahead without the woke, with a new show dropping on YouTube every Friday night at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Our bias, we always declare it right up front. Our perspective on the news is centre right, what we would call good old-fashioned, everyday, common sense Aussie values. And most importantly, we pay our own way with your voluntary support. And speaking of voluntary support, we've got a big announcement that we're making at the moment, the launch of our new website and our members club, the exclusive side, which is really the inclusive side because everyone is welcome to join. If you'd like to support the show on a regular basis and do it directly so that we get all the contributions and can put every cent towards the show, then head to othersidetv.com.au. othersidetv.com.au and sign up. We'll send you a link to the show each week via email or SMS if you prefer, and we can then never lose contact no matter what the government or big tech might do to censor us. That's othersidetv.com.au. Check it out. I'm not going to give Lydia Thorpe the time of day by replaying any of her nonsense or the nonsense that she's spewed since her appalling low-grade performance art spectacle in front of the King. I'm just going to make some comments about telling the truth and some comments about how we should never forget that Lydia Thorpe was the deputy leader in the Senate of the Greens. Because Senator Thorpe, apart from being a disgrace to our parliament, is someone who bases her radical extremism on a pack of lies about Australia as a nation and about our history. And she perpetuates those lies for her own self-promotion, fame, and political career advancement. And that is not okay. Her biggest lie is that the King is not our head of state. He is. He's the head of state because Australia was a British colony and because 2/3 of the people living in this country today, and probably 80% of the people living in this country today who were born here, still honour that national heritage. We still understand that despite all of its flaws, and there were many, that Britain gave us our rule of law, our systems of government, and were the people who helped move this land from a place sparsely inhabited by various groups of Aboriginal people to a nation in 1901 founded on the greatest principles of liberal democracy known to mankind at the time, with the greatest technological advances known to mankind at the time. And people in this country understand that that actually means something, that a nation is not country, it is not land. Australia is a nation of many peoples, brought together by fate and history, and if you believe, God. And we share a head of state with the nation that led and built and gave its history and technology to our birth. Australia, the nation, was the child of Britain. It's been shaped by many other great influences from other nations and cultures ever since. I have Lebanese and Irish and Scottish ancestry. But I can happily acknowledge it was the English that were largely responsible for the systems and institutions from which we benefit and which allowed this nation to become one of the most amazing ones on earth. including the Aboriginal native people who inhabited these lands originally. But Australia, the nation, is a child of Britain, and we share a head of state with the people of Britain for that reason. So when you shout at our head of state, or you go on international television and you embarrass all of us with your nonsense, we will call you out. And I seriously question your moral legitimacy to be sitting in our Senate. Never mind the legal issues that Pauline Hanson has pointed out this week. You got into that Senate on the back of a political party full of socialist weirdos pretending to be environmentalists, the Greens. And even they kicked you out. We should all take this as a clear warning on the state of the Greens and what the Greens really are. The watermelon party. Green on the outside, red, red, red in the middle with pips. Not only were the Greens responsible for making Lydia Thorpe a senator, they made her their deputy leader in the Senate. So just let that sink in carefully for a moment. Lydia Thorpe was the deputy leader in the Senate of the Greens. Remember that as your pen hovers over the ballot paper at the next election you vote in, folks, and you're confronted with a how to vote card covered in trees and smiling people telling you how much they love the environment more than anyone else in Parliament does, and you think, oh, they seem nice, maybe I'll vote for them. Nope, they're not nice, they're socialists. They believe in big authoritarian state control of everything. Massive government and massive taxes, which means no choice and no freedom for you. The bigger the government, the smaller the freedom. The more powerful we make Canberra elites and the bureaucrats, the less powerful we make ourselves. And the Greens are the party that brought us all Lydia Thorpe, and they made her deputy leader in the Senate. So while Lydia Thorpe may be on her way to political irrelevance for all time, thank goodness, the party that put her there is not, but it sure needs to be. And you can make that happen. You're watching The Other Side, your weekly analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke, and this is a very exciting and important couple of weeks for us at The Other Side because we've just launched our new website and a new way for you to support the show and help us keep doing what we're doing and maybe even more of it in the future. Just go to othersidetv.com.au and sign up for free, or sign up to the exclusive side, which is very inclusive, and support us for as little as $4.50 a month. That's not even the price of a small coffee these days. We really do need your support to keep us going and growing because, as you know, we don't get $1.2 billion of money taken from taxpayers against their will to play with, like our Too Cool for School friends over at the ABC. So that's othersidetv.com.au, and even if you can't afford to support us financially, please do go there, do sign up for free. There's that option as well, and we can then still keep in touch if that evil misinformation and disinformation bill or the e-safety police decide to come after us. othersidetv.com.au, our new website. Check it out. Conservatives gathered in Sydney this week for the ARC conference, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, an initiative founded by former Australian Deputy Prime Minister and podcaster John Anderson, Jordan Peterson, and a woman from the UK named Philippa Shroud. She's a baroness. They had the very first big ARC conference in London earlier this year, and they're having another one in February next year. But they had a little mini ARC in Sydney this week, ARC Australia. Lots of good content, wise words, great speakers. It was really good. And John Anderson made some very important points about the current state of our culture in Australia and the West, particularly the tendency of our educators in most of our schools and universities to give our kids a biased, one-sided view of history in which our Western European heritage is constantly painted as bad or oppressive.
I find it almost beyond comprehension that in our focus on the things that we've got wrong, in our willingness to give way to a narrative of declinism, of fault-finding, that we fail to properly recognise the shoulders upon which we really stand. It would be an appalling thing if our children were to say of us, who judged so many of those who have gone before us unfairly, that we were the ones that stole their heritage, that we removed their opportunities to live in a flourishing, free democracy of the sort that we enjoy. It would be, I think, an unforgivable pardon if our children and our grandchildren are forced to reflect that our best days as a young nation are behind us, not in front of us.
Yeah, very well said. Former Australian Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson speaking at the ARC conference in Sydney this week. The most important issue facing our nation right now is the massive size of government and the cost of it, leading to the appalling level of debt we are in as a nation. A point that was hammered home in a speech by Australia's longest-serving Treasurer, Peter Costello.
There is one institution that is getting bigger and commanding more resources than ever. It's government. In Australia, it has a local, a state and a national manifestation. And together, like a creeper, it is covering more area and consuming more resources than ever before in peacetime. It's been a very long time since any pruning was done.
Yeah, well, why would the government prune itself and make itself weaker? It never will unless we force it to. Australian government of all levels spend around $1 million a year. $1 trillion. Now, some of it they spend quite well on important stuff that's done efficiently, but a lot of it they do not. Because there's no competition as there is in the private economy, of the competition of the free market and business, where we've got to fight every day to deliver value for customers or we go broke. People who work for the government have a lot more leeway to make mistakes, sometimes very costly ones that end up wasting a lot of our nation's wealth. And government just keeps making itself bigger and more powerful. It has the power to, so why wouldn't it? A lot of our fellow Aussies don't seem to care. They keep voting for more of it. They generally think the government should take care of us and that it can or will. It can't and won't, by the way. It's run out of money and it's borrowing at an alarming rate just to keep doing the stuff that it's already promised us it would do. This can't end well. And you can only keep taxing the rich bastards, as those geniuses in the Greens like to keep saying, for so long before all the money runs out. And it's already run out. Mr. Costello compared the increases in taxes that we're paying now as Aussies per head compared to what we used to pay back in the time that he was Treasurer 2 decades ago. Now, taking inflation into account and using what they call constant dollars so you get a proper comparison across the years, in 2008, the real tax per capita in Australia was $14,630. So just under $15,000 for every man, woman and child in this country. But today, Mr. Costello points out, it's just over $17,000, a rise of 16%.
And some of you are going to see this and you're going to say, $14,630. I'm paying a lot more than that, for which I apologise. But there's a lot of people that don't pay tax in Australia. Babies don't pay tax, children don't pay tax, the old don't pay tax, people under the tax-free threshold don't pay income tax.
Now, if you added in inflation, that number, of course, would be much higher, but there's no reason that that base number should be 16% higher today. In fact, it should be lower because there's more of us to share the government services provided and the cost of providing them. If it was a private business and you were a shareholder, you'd be saying, hang on, where are the efficiencies and economies of scale here? And this is just federal taxes that Mr. Costello is talking about. But it gets even worse. The amount the government is taking in tax for every man, woman and child is $17,000 a year, but they're spending $18,000 a year for every man, woman and child.
So payments have been increasing nearly 2% per annum over those last 16 years. And you're going to say to me, well, how does a government spend more than it raises? Well, a government spends more than it raises by borrowing the difference. People don't see it as their debt, it's not in their name. And if it's in the government's name, they think it's the government's problem. And part of today's tax goes to servicing yesterday's debts. Less of today's tax goes to today's services. Things begin to run down. Potholes appear in the roads, wait times lengthen at the hospitals. But a government can carry on for as long as its lenders keep lending it the money.
It's the great trick of the left. Just keep giving stuff away. Never mind what it costs. By the time the young people wake up to the fact that they are the ones who'll be paying for all this free stuff that they so love, they'll be old and we'll have new young people to fool to take their place.
When I hear politicians promising young people all kinds of new spending to help them on their way, they rarely mention that the costs will be paid by those young people through taxes and borrowings over their lifetime. And the costs will be higher than ever. I could do a similar analysis for the UK, I could do it for the US. In fact, they're in worse positions than us because they didn't start from as strong a position in 2008. Now, modesty prevents me from saying why we were so strong in 2008, but do you think you're getting a good return on all of that extra spending? On average? Do you think people are better off than they were in 2008? On average, do you think they're 27% better off? Has the jump in spending made us a stronger society than we were 20 years ago? What I can't understand is why governments that fail in core responsibilities should be allowed to expand their reach. Do they need new areas to fail in? The most incompetent government in Australia comes to mind. After failing every test of prudent budget management and infrastructure, the Victorian government decided it would embark on treaty negotiation with Indigenous people and join China's Belt and Road program. These are federal issues. Nothing other than rank posturing and media diversion could come of it. My view in government was we should stick to what we were there for and do it well rather than find new areas to fail in.
Peter Costello, Australia's longest serving treasurer, speaking some truths at the ARC conference in Sydney this week. Here at the other side, we do not get more than $1 billion of taxpayer money like the ABC does to waste on fun stuff that we and our friends like while ignoring the public that we're supposed to serve. We have to rely on your support of this show. But I also hate asking for charity. So we've done a deal with what I think is the best VPN service in the world so that you can support this show and get excellent value for yourself in return. Private Internet Access VPN is a virtual private network. You download their app onto your phone, your TV, your computer, whatever you use, and it'll route all your data through a different server location so that you can't be tracked by the prying eyes of big government and big corporations. It keeps you and your family truly safe, and it will not massively slow down your internet speeds or make it harder to use your devices like some VPNs do. Private Internet Access, PIA VPN, is quick and easy to install, and once you've downloaded it, that's pretty much it. You can sign up using our special Other Side code for less than $3 a month. Unbelievable. That is a whopping 83% off the normal price. And you'll get the first 4 months free, and you will be helping our show a lot. So get onto it, piavpn.com/otherside to get the special deal. And get this, if you've got a Netflix account, by signing on through a server in another country to Netflix, like the US, for example, you'll get access to that country's library of Netflix shows on your account as if you were in that country, which is also great if you want Netflix in a different language or something. piavpn.com/otherside. Former Treasurer Peter Costello used to be the chairman of Channel 9, and Channel 9 owns most of the traditionally conservative commercial talk radio stations in Australia, but he presided over an executive that shifted those stations a little editorially away from the right, as it seemed to do with the 9 TV network's editorial stance also. This was more in line with the newspapers that they bought, the old Fairfax newspapers, the Melbourne Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, which have always been known as centre-left to left-leaning. And these 9 media newspapers reporting on the ARC conference in Sydney this week was just awful. The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald have a gossip column called CBD Confidential, and it childishly carried out an unprovoked attack on ARC organiser Dr. Jordan Peterson. The column reported that Peterson was supposed to appear live in person at the ARC Australia event in Sydney, but that he left it too late to get his visa and he had to fly back to Canada for a family emergency. But instead of being decent and reasonable and mature about this, the Age and Sydney Morning Herald gossip column mocked Dr. Peterson, saying he couldn't attend his own conference and had to Zoom in. They wrote that Peterson was best known, in their superior educated opinion, for apocalyptic ramblings about the death of Western civilization and life advice for teenage boys who just can't seem to get a girl. Wow, what a horrible thing to say. What a nasty and mean dig that is, not only at Peterson, but more importantly at our teenage boys, or all men really, especially those who are actually lonely or having trouble meeting women and have found some wisdom and solace in Peterson's writings. But that's what they do in the cool kid inner city media and academic cliques. They mock ordinary people. And they wonder why nobody buys their newspapers or has any trust or respect for journalism in this country anymore. Because they're nasty and mean and unpleasant in the extreme. Jordan Peterson, of course, has faced a lot worse with left-wing media all over the world. I'm sure he doesn't give a rat's about the Sydney Morning Herald or the Age. They all attack him with hit pieces. Peterson is enemy number one to leftist academics because he challenges them intelligently and on their own turf, and they can't stand that. They can't dismiss him as just another dumb deplorable, as they so enjoy doing to so many of us ordinary people. I mean, clearly Peterson has nothing to offer, right? No value to bring. Only 50 million people have watched the famous interview on the UK's Channel 4, where he stood up to the very kind of person that writes columns like those creeps at 9 newspapers, the self-important presenter and interviewer Cathy Newman. He showed up all her hubris and performative nonsense so badly that it broke the internet and shot Peterson to international fame. I mean, only 10 million people bought his book, 12 Rules for Life. Only 8 million people subscribed to his YouTube channel. I was at ARC in Sydney this week and I saw the Peterson presentation on Zoom. It was far from rambling. It would only appear to be rambling to those of very low intellect, which I suppose explains the CBD column's view that it was rambling. They couldn't follow it, the poor darlings. There's nothing wrong with not being able to follow very clever academics when they speak, but it might be best to show a little humility and not call them ramblers just because you can't understand what they're saying. As for the, quote, death of Western civilization that Peterson was talking about, or they're claiming he was talking about, that isn't a view held only by Jordan Peterson, but by countless of very established and respected social critics and commentators all over the world. And Peterson's goal is to prevent the death of Western civilization. And why are these creeps mocking teenage boys who just can't seem to get a girl? I guess it's okay to mock men and boys in the elitist bubble that these clowns live and work within. Is it any wonder that Peterson has defied the odds and become so popular? And still these arrogant clowns on the left don't get it. He's popular because he brings a message to young people, and particularly young men, that the world is not about to end in a climate catastrophe. He rejects the perpetual victim mindset that's fed to kids by woke teachers, educated in woke universities by woke academics. He speaks about personally empowering concepts like personal responsibility and taking action and building confidence and hard work and meeting life's challenges and unfairness and rising above them. The viewing of life as a wonderful adventure, an adventure that we have a responsibility to accept and embrace.
There isn't anything more exciting that young people can hear than that message, the equation between responsibility and adventure. I've talked literally to hundreds of thousands of people around the world in hundreds of forums of the sort that I'm addressing tonight. And every single time I talked about the relationship between responsibility and adventure, the entire audience went dead silent. It's a message that hasn't been promulgated effectively, not least by the conservatives and the classic liberals, for at least 4 decades. Nothing better than the call to responsibility. And we're seeing a shift among young men already across the West in that direction.
Meaning that will sustain you through the trials and tribulations of life is to be found in the adopting of as much responsibility as you can bear. Wow, what a concept. It's the adult emerging, the true leader. And he's right. Kids have been getting the opposite message in our country and all over the Western world for way too long. Governments that want to control you will seek to infantilize you, make you like little children so you never grow up and you always need them to take care of you. He's also right that if Western civilization doesn't cut out that cultural cancer, the woke mind virus of fatalistic despair, it will die. Pity the children who write for the SMH and the Age don't listen harder and try to actually understand what Peterson is saying. They might actually enjoy growing up and embracing as much responsibility for their own lives as they can bear.
And that's a sacrificial gesture, by the way. That's the sacrifice of the narrow self, the narrow, hedonistic, immature, underdeveloped self, to the self that extends over time into the future and that involves family and broader community. And that brings us from the better story to the issue of responsible citizenship. We're in a crisis of identity in the West, and that's because we took fractionated individual liberalism to its logical conclusion. People who attempt to find their redeeming identity in their own fragmented individuality will fail. We know that self-consciousness, for example, is associated with negative emotion and misery. Communal creatures like us who are deeply social find our purpose in the sacrifice of narrow self-interest to the future, to the people we love, to our families, to our broader community in a hierarchical relationship, all the way up to the nation and beyond.
Yeah, it's horrible stuff, very dangerous and kooky ideas. He has that old Dr. Peterson, all that personal responsibility and individual empowerment focused on the betterment of our families and communities and nations. Terrible, terrible ideas. Thank God we have the modern left and the developmentally challenged journalists at the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age to remind us all that we are doomed oppressive victims every day. So good for our kids' sense of well-being and the cultural health of our society. Thank you, 9 newspapers. Thank you. Did you know that for every 2 to 3 teachers in Australia working hard in classrooms across the country, there is one taxpayer-funded bureaucrat sitting behind a desk doing admin and making and enforcing rules and regulations that make those teachers' jobs even harder? That's right, one bureaucrat for every 2 to 3 frontline teachers. That's how bloated our public service has become. But you'll never hear about it from the regular teachers' unions because they also represent many of those public servants. So says the leading alternative teachers' union in Australia, the TPAA. If you're a teacher, it's time to change to a union that will not only look after you without using your money to support the Labor Party, but which is taking on the government education system to sidestep those bureaucrats and use the savings to pay all teachers 25% more. The current waste must stop. All the red tape doesn't just suck up resources and time, it actually takes the teachers away from teaching our kids and it wastes their time filling in crazy paperwork for meddling bureaucrats. So join the union that will actually stand up against big bloated government. Join the TPAA, the Teachers Professional Association of Australia. To find out more, just Google TPAA. The TPAA's fees are half the price because none of your money goes to any political party. And as an Other Side viewer, if you use our special code, OTHERSIDE1, when you sign up, you'll get a further $100 off your first year's fees as a rebate on your first payments. Go to tpaa.redunion.com.au, tpaa.redunion.com.au to sign up now for a better union and support the Other Side too by supporting our sponsors. Thank you, teachers, you legends. Sometimes a bit of childish fun is warranted, and you've got to hand it to the Melbourne Herald Sun newspaper for this stunt. They took a cardboard cutout of Dan Andrews to Glasgow, the city that will now host the 2026 Commonwealth Games that Melbourne abandoned. The life-sized dictator Dan had a kilt and a suitcase full of money, and they asked the Glaswegians on the street, what they thought of him, given that $200 million of Aussie taxpayers' money is being given to the Scottish city to take on the Commonwealth Games burden. And of course, they love him. So not only does Labor make money from hard-working Aussies in tax and give it away in Australia to win votes, they're giving it away overseas now too. The newspaper reports that Glasgow residents are thrilled with how everything's turned out. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Victoria, they reportedly said. So let's remember what happened here, shall we? Andrews ditched the Games in July last year. The Auditor General report in March this year slammed him, saying it cost taxpayers $380 million in settlement payments to various bodies, including the Commonwealth Games Federation. Commonwealth Games Federation has now handed $200 million of that money over to Glasgow's authorities to help pay for the Games. As a result of this costly and terrible mistake, the Victorian Labor Party and Dan Andrews will be forced to pay up. Just kidding. Of course they won't. They genuinely wanted these Games, and any claims from political commentators that they mainly wanted to use the Games win as a vote booster for the last state election are complete nonsense. Who could have known that the budget of $2.9 billion to host the Games all across Victorian cities was too small? And who could have known that a forecast would emerge after the election that showed the Games would actually cost $7 billion? I mean, you can't blame Dan Andrews and the Victorian Labor government and actually expect them to pay for their well-intentioned tiny little mistake that cost you hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, that'd be mean. Meanwhile, in the Victorian capital, you may have heard a story this week about the Christian Melbourne all-girls private school, Methodist Ladies College, now known as MLC, not letting students wear crosses or any kind of religious symbol. A Baptist pastor criticised them publicly, and a Year 12 student complained to the Herald Sun newspaper, saying that the school allows students to wear furry tails if they identify as cats and dogs. This, of course, can cause problems with other students that identify as Haitians from Ohio, apparently. Just kidding. And they also allow rainbow-coloured socks for LGBTQ identifying students. That's okay. But this Christian school bans anyone from wearing a necklace with a crucifix on it. Now, the school hit back. It was outraged. These claims are outrageous. Later in the week, they said, yes, we do ban kids from wearing necklaces with a cross on them. Wait, what, they do? And they admitted it? Oh, yes. It's all part of a no jewellery policy. Okay, I've never heard of a Christian school that bans crucifix necklaces, ever. It's traditionally the one piece of jewellery that's allowed, precisely because it's a religious adornment, not cosmetic. Also, surely banning it would breach one of those woke laws against discrimination that Victorian Labor lovies adore, wouldn't it? The young student that spoke to the Herald Sun said that girls are instructed to take off their crosses by teachers when other students complain that they are offensive to non-Christians at a Christian school. Now, the Methodist Ladies College principal, Julia Shea, scolded the naughty newspaper, saying in a statement that students are only permitted to wear a watch and earrings. Recent media reports included claims that students were told to remove Christian jewellery because it was offensive, while others were attending school wearing furry ears and tails. These statements are false and irresponsible. The Herald Sun journalists were told to report to the principal's office immediately for detention. No, that last bit didn't actually happen, but this did. MLC is a proudly Christian girls' school. We do not find Christian symbols offensive, Ms. Shea said with a straight face, right after admitting that she bans them. We aim to apply a consistent uniform policy that prohibits visible jewellery. We do not have any students attending school wearing furry tails and ears. MLC students are not permitted to wear ears and tails as part of the academic uniform. Well, that's good to know, Julia. However, she didn't make any comment about the rainbow-coloured socks. She said the uniform policy applies equally to all students and is not related to religion or any individual's beliefs. It just ensures that every student adheres to the same standard of presentation, fostering unity within our diverse community. And there it is, the slip of the tongue that tells all. the policy is aimed at fostering unity across our diverse community. How exactly? By not allowing Christian symbols at a Christian school, you're fostering unity. How? I mean, the only way that I can see is that you'd be fostering unity by not offending anyone in the diverse community, right? That's what you're actually saying there. But you also just said that the reports that students were told to remove Christian jewelry because it was offensive to non-Christian students were false, and irresponsibly false, in fact. So which is it, Julia? You've been a naughty girl and you've been caught out. Off to the principal's office for you so you can give yourself detention. Can I give you a little tip about your silly little rules? Drop it. Let the girls wear their crucifix necklaces and stop allowing the fake religion of woke nonsense to undermine the real millennia-old religion upon which your school was founded. There's nothing inoffensive, diverse, and inclusive about any of this. It's highly offensive, narrow-minded, and divisive. But you gotta love it when they tie themselves up in their own woke waffle and get caught out, haven't you? You're watching The Other Side, your weekly analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. And this is a very exciting and important week for us because we've just launched our new website and a new way for you to support the show and help us keep doing what we're doing and maybe even more of it in the future. Just go to othersidetv.com.au and sign up for free, or sign up to the exclusive side and support us for as little as $4.50 a month. That's not even the price of a small coffee these days. We really do need your support to keep going and growing because, as you know, we don't get that $1.2 billion that our friends at the ABC do. So it's othersidetv.com.au, and if you can't afford to sign up financially, you can sign up for free. How's that? So that we can still keep in touch and the misinformation and e-safety police can't come after us. othersidetv.com.au, our brand new website. Check it out. And joining us now, she does every week from Spectator Flat White, Spectator Online, the magazine, of course, and Spectator TV, Alexandra Marshalls. Alexandra, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Damien.
Some interesting stories coming up this week on your side of things. You've got a fascinating story about somebody working to do the right thing when it comes to protecting our right to use cash. So important.
Yes, well, Sarah Game, who is the MLC for One Nation down in South Australia, has launched a one-woman campaign to protect cash down in the state. Now, she's called, I'm going to read it so I get it right, it's the Public and Audit Cash Payments Amendment Bill 2024. Now, she came up with this when she heard from her constituents that basically council groups were no longer accepting cash payments from citizens, and people were horrified because they couldn't go down and pay their licenses, pay their rates, pay whatever they wanted in cash. They were told they have to subscribe to all of the government's new automatic payment systems. So she looked into it. She's gone through all the businesses down there. She's done a lot of groundwork, and she's decided that she is going to spearhead the lead to protect the payments of cash up to $10,000.
I think it's really important, and I mean, there's only a small percentage of the community that kind of get it. Like most people will go, well, it's just more convenient, and what's wrong with you? Why don't you use your phone? But there are certain payments you might want to make in cash. You might not want the government to be able to track anything, and it's totally okay, I think, and I don't think we should be, putting criminals' interests before the rest of us by saying, well, we've got to catch the criminals, so we have to be able to track every single payment. No, what about the rest of us who just want some damn privacy?
As if the government actually cares about stopping criminals. I mean, I used to work in this industry. We tell them about fraud payments all the time. They couldn't care less. This was all about them trying to simplify things for themselves. But you know what? Everyone cares about cash when the banks go down all of a sudden, which happened last week, and you can't pay for anything. So in short, she's basically saying we must ensure that cash remains legal tender so that we have some kind of backup to our systems that we can continue to function as a society if anything was to go wrong with electronics, with hacking, with banking, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so we need it for that. We need it for security, so we're not so dependent on technology. And we need it because we need to get some of our damn rights, liberty, and privacy back. I hope her bill gets a lot of attention if it doesn't actually get up, but it also should be duplicated, I think, by One Nation, if possible, in every state Thanks very much for your time, Alexandra. We'll catch you again next week.
Thank you very much. And just by the way, on the cover, we've got the Freedom Fries and Donald Trump working at Macca's, so look out for that one in the news agency.
Great. Spectator magazine. See you soon. If you have a Netflix or other streaming media account from a global company and you're on holidays and log in from another country, you may have noticed that shows that are available in those other countries are different. That's because different media companies have different deals with different streaming services in different countries. Imagine being able to log into Netflix, though, as if you were in America, or maybe a country that speaks a language other than English that you speak, to access more shows, but you can do it all without leaving your couch here in Australia. Well, there is a way. There is a way. Private Internet Access VPN is a virtual private network. You download their app onto your phone, your TV, your computer, whatever you use, and it'll route your data through a different server location. Not only can you access more content, but a VPN keeps you safe and secure and your family safe so that you can't be tracked by prying eyes of big government and big corporations. And it will not massively slow down your internet speeds or make it harder to use your devices like some other VPNs do. Private Internet Access, PIA VPN. It's quick and easy to install, and once you've downloaded it, that is pretty much it. And the great news is if you sign up for PIA VPN, you are also helping the other side heaps and getting great value for money as well. And you can sign up using our special Other Side code for less than $3 a month. That's a whopping 83% off the normal price, and you'll get the first 4 months free. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside right now to get our special deal. That's piavpn.com/otherside. So Bruce LEHRMANN's life is ruined and reputation destroyed on the back of unproven allegations, even though he's never been found guilty of the crime of rape or had a fair trial. But who cares, right? He's just a Liberal Party guy, a bit nerdy, looks a bit sleazy, probably did it, you know. At least that's what the civil defamation hearing found. He probably did it on the balance of probabilities. So if he's innocent, then, you know, too bad. I mean, you know, who cares? You got to love the Australian justice system sometimes, haven't you? It's the vibe of the thing. Anyway, a huge and delightful win for Bruce this week. The courts have ruled that instead of having to pay $200,000 in security to Channel 10 while he pushes forward with his appeal against the defamation case ruling against him, he can now go ahead and appeal without having to get himself into crippling debt in an attempt to clear his name. Lucky Bruce! Just to explain this a bit better, Bruce wants to appeal. Obviously, Channel 10 and Lisa Wilkinson don't want him to, so they wanted $200,000 as a security payment. But Federal Court Justice Wendy Abraham has this week dismissed that application by Network 10, so Bruce can now move forward with the appeal. He doesn't have to fork out $200K, and the judge has accepted his application not to have to pay the $2 million in legal costs that he's got to pay to the network and Wilkinson until after the appeal. Isn't that great? I mean, shouldn't that kind of thing go without saying? I mean, shouldn't you be able to appeal and then everything gets put on hold until the appeal is done? Wouldn't that be, justice? Anyway, in court last week, LEHRMANN's lawyer said that Network 10 pursuing the security payment from LEHRMANN was a bullying tactic to shut down the appeal. Anyway, now Justice Abraham has also ordered the network to pay the legal fees that LEHRMANN has just incurred in this latest little technical hearing about that security payment, which kind of proves the old adage about going to court. You might win, you might lose, but the lawyers always win. Meanwhile, in real, actual crime news, a balaclava-clad man fired around 10 shots into a home and a car on Chisholm Road in Auburn in Sydney's West this week. There was a guy inside the car. He was backing out of the driveway when he was shot at. Then just 10 minutes later, the police had to rush to another location nearby after reports that the car was on fire. And then another location where another car was on fire. And this is all understood to be gangland-related violence. So things are just going great under our left-wing criminal justice system that's driven by an ideology that worries more about violent criminals' well-being than that of victims. Unless, of course, the alleged criminal is a man and the matter involves some kind of alleged sexual misbehaviour, then you're guilty until proven innocent. The Daily Telegraph newspaper has reported that a 19-year-old underworld figure was warned by police to leave Sydney because of a bounty on his head. Warned by police. That's how it works now, apparently. Can someone tell me when my country became an episode of Breaking Bad? I mean, the exploding cars fun was apparently the third attempt on this kid's life in 18 months. One guy who is not prepared to accept that Underbelly should be a documentary about modern Australian life is the man tipped to become Premier of Queensland this week, David CRISAFULLI. He met with victims of crime, people who had lost loved ones in awful random incidents, and he held a pre-election news conference to underscore his tough-on-crime approach and the absolute failure of Labor's approach to law and order. During that news conference, he got a little choked up. It looked genuine to me. It didn't look like he was bunging it on at all, and I mean that sincerely. I think he was a bit choked up after meeting those people. And here's how Sky News Australia reported it.
Parents who have had to comfort kids after their safe space has been violated, to try and tell their children that things will be all right, even though deep down they don't know if it really is. But that's the trauma that they have had to go through and their families have had to go through. And behind me is a father who's putting his hand up to serve. My commitment to all of these Queenslanders, and indeed every single Queenslander, is by the end of the year, the Making Queensland Safer laws will be laws in this state. Adult crime, adult time will be in legislation. It's a commitment I made him, and I'm making it to Queenslanders. And I've got the team to deliver it, because for 4 years we have been listening when the government tried to say there wasn't an issue. I've got a lawyer, a prosecutor, a detective of police, and they are ready to implement the changes that this state needs.
David CRISAFULLI, the man who might become the first Liberal NP or LNP Premier of an Australian mainland state since New South Wales was lost to Labor in early 2023. The Queensland state election is this weekend. Some of you who watch the show on Sunday or later will know the result already, but as we sit here on the night before, polling suggests that the LNP will prevail and oust the 8-year-old Labor government. Despite Queensland being a pretty conservative state, inner and middle ring Brisbane is very left-wing. The LNP have only been in government for 5 years out of the last 35. A truly woeful and inexcusable effort, really. And I believe it's the result of a lack of discipline, professionalism, cooperation and talent across the LNP organisation. There's too much infighting, too much ego before outcomes. They won't so much win this election as the Labor Party will lose it. They need about 54% of the vote to win enough seats to govern in their own right, according to some serious analysis. And now a late poll from 9 newspapers suggests that Premier Stephen Miles has narrowed the gap to 52 to 48. An even later poll that's just come in from Newspoll, the Australian newspaper, has it at 52.5 to 47.5 on the two-party preferred basis. So a possible outcome is that the LNP will win, but not with a majority. The reality is nobody actually knows. Queensland elections are notoriously hard to predict, and I wouldn't bet on one. David CRISAFULLI has been delivering an excellent late-run performance this week, I think. It's a pity, though, that we didn't see more of that in the past 4 years, and that we didn't see it more deeply across his entire team, his entire front bench. I really hope it's not too little, too late. The state debt is out of control and heading for an unprecedented $200 billion after so much Labor and union spending and bad management that's made delivering services so costly. In their last debate late this week, hosted by News Limited, it was an audience member, a UK immigrant who moved to the Sunshine Coast 8 years ago, who asked the best question.
You both talk a great story in terms of we've seen tax reductions, all this money is 11% on the in the health, on hospitals, the ramping, the rego reduction, the transport, the 50 cents transport. We've got the Olympics coming. There's going to be expenditure. I'm scared that we're just going to run out of money. And I'm a financial background myself, CFO. Just tell me we're not going to run out of money because you tell us everything we want to hear. And that's the big thing.
Well, thanks, Simon.
Well, respect for your money is one of our pillars, and you need to know that you deserve better than what you're getting, and you will. Now, I look at the money that we've spent on external consultants, particularly the big four in recent years, and it has spiralled out of control. And I want to see a world-class public service that doesn't have to farm everything out. I look at the billions of dollars in blowouts in projects that no minister has ever been held accountable for, and there must be a better way. We are going to re-establish a productivity commission in Queensland. The second order of business after the Making Queensland Safer laws will be re-establishing the productivity commission, which will make sure that it is a laser-like focus on getting government running the way it should, and it will do a review of the building industry. All of those things are important to us, and you need to know that our plan is fully costed and fully funded, and that matters to us.
Well done, David. Great response. Stephen Miles doesn't have much to work with in reality, but he did his best.
The last 2 years we delivered record surpluses. You're right, though, this year and next year we've gone into deficit to fund those extra supports that we're delivering to households. But our economy is really strong, and so we are projecting a return to surplus in 2026, 27, and a surplus from those years onwards. So that means that we can afford to do those really important things for the future of our state while returning the budget to surplus.
Okay, a bit of a Kamala word salad that was. A surplus in the family budget for 1 year is not really a surplus if you've whacked $200 billion on the credit card, mate. And the public know it. And you know they know it. The fact is that the difference in policy positions from the old Palaszczuk government to the new Miles government, which is basically made up of all the same ministers pretty much, has seen a massive increase in spending, including a bizarre foray into our homes, offering free school lunches. That's on top of massive subsidies for public transport to pull fares down to 50 cents and massive overspending on an energy rebate of $1,000 for everyone. That's not responsible government. That's deceit. And I'd go so far as to say that it's theft from our kids' future, because they're the ones that'll be paying off that credit card so we can have those goodies now. But if people voted with logic and rationality, elections would be simple. People vote emotionally, and Smiles has been all over social media, handing out free goodies for months. This was his latest 8-second offering on TikTok this week.
Somebody say, man, you love, ding dong, bring it, somebody say, man, you love, want my curry.
If that's Miles' last run, never mind 8 seconds, he won't last longer than 9 seconds. I hope. Of course, as I said, this cheesy stuff often works. People don't often see through the waffle. It's Kamala smiles all the way with some folks. And he looks so sweet. But back to the serious issues. The number one issue that no one saw coming was the abortion debate wedge that country Conservative Katter Australia Party MP Robbie Katter gifted to Labor. And after adding some water and a little stir, the scare campaign was on, giving Labor all the oxygen it needed to attack the LNP. The ALP holds 51 seats in the Queensland Parliament, giving it a 5-seat majority out of the total 93 seats. Queensland's a one-chamber parliament. There's no upper house in the Sunshine State. Labor will almost certainly lose the vast majority of its regional seats that have margins of less than 5% already, and they'll have to fight a hell of a turf war in the inner city strongholds to the Greens. They can thank their woeful woke education policies for that. Well done, Labor, on that little self-attack. Meanwhile, the Liberal part of the LNP is hoping the gloss of its popular Brisbane City Council local government arm can help to wrestle some of those 36 Brisbane seats that it rarely holds. Because Queensland doesn't have enough local media, there hasn't been enough debate on the issues that really matter in this election, I think. Here are some of the numbers that have not been discussed. Queensland's government payroll eats up more than 40% of all spending. Total salaries paid by the taxpayer are going to hit $35 billion in the next few years. The Olympics will cost the taxpayer $10 billion. The level of spending offered by both major parties will almost certainly put the state on the radar of the credit ratings agencies like Standard & Poor's and Moody's and Fitch, and we might get another downgrade to our credit rating, meaning that the debt that we're already servicing will cost more in interest payments because the interest payments will go up because we'll have a lower credit rating. We're more risky. And then there's the small problem of a falling metallurgical coal price. And that's what's been funding most of the state government's largesse of electricity rebates, school lunches and 50-cent public transport fares. The state's resources sector, which has fought the government on its royalty tax regime, has only a handful of projects that are likely to kick off in the coming year. The royalties are too high for them. And finally, probably the most serious number of all, Queensland's youth crime data. 250,000 victims. It's time for responsible change, and I hope a new CRISAFULLI government will actually deliver it. So, if you are a passionate classical liberal, libertarian or conservative and you're not happy about the wet liberals infiltrating the LNP in Queensland and you wouldn't be seen dead voting Labor or Green, what alternatives are there for you to vote for? Well, not too many. It's incredibly hard for minor parties to get a foothold in Queensland because it is a unicameral parliament. That means the parliament only has one house, a House of Representatives called the Legislative Assembly. There's no upper house like the Senate that we have federally or the legislative councils that other states have. And that is how minor parties usually get a Guernsey in Parliament. So Queenslanders have to really knuckle down and focus if they want any minor parties in the mix. Out west and up north, they'll back the Qatar Australia Party. They've already got 4 seats in Parliament. And there's One Nation and the Libertarian Party, formerly the Liberal Democrats. But they really can't afford to run candidates in every single seat and they rarely get media airtime. But I thought we might give them a bit of a crack. So if you live in Keppel, the electorate of Keppel in central Queensland, around Yeppoon, just north of Rockhampton, you can vote for James Ashby of One Nation, and James joins me now. James, thanks for your time. How many One Nation candidates is the party able to field across the state for this election at the moment?
Damien, we started fielding candidates 18 months ago for this Queensland election, and ultimately the drive was to try and fill all 93 seats over that period. We've done that, and it's the first successful time we've run 93 candidates in a Queensland election since Pauline Hanson came back to the party in 2015.
Wow, okay, well, I happily stand corrected. That's good to hear. And how many MPs have you got in the Parliament at the moment, and how many are you hoping to get up?
Well, we've had one elected to the Queensland Parliament the last 2 election cycles. We'd like to extend that. We'd like to win Morani back at this next election. Obviously, we've got a new candidate in the seat of Morani. But of course, with 93 candidates, anything's possible. There's just so much discontent towards the 2 major parties. We've seen the primary vote over the last couple of weeks of the LNP's collapse significantly, and also to the point where Stephen Miles is again preferred Premier of Queensland, which is highly unusual. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that David CRISAFULLI has mainly focused on the southeast corner. He's made a few flit in, flit out visits to regional parts of the state, but a lot of regional people where I am, they see through that. And they want somebody that actually understands the regional parts of this state as well as the southeast corner, because for too long we've been forgotten.
So what are the biggest issues where you are, James, that you are getting into issues and policy a little bit? What do you think is really driving the vote in coastal and regional Queensland?
Well, we've heard this thousands of times over and over again, but crime continues to be one of the biggest issues up and down the east coast of Queensland and even inland to far remote regions like Mount Isa. You just can't escape the crime in Queensland, because what's happened here in the state is the fact that kids have been let off with slaps on the wrist. We've got a Labor government who have lightened the sentencing on those kids, and so therefore they know they can get away with literally blue murder. And we now got to get back to a position where we tighten those laws, but also to make people feel safe in their own homes and when they're out and about in the community. So crime is the big issue. Regional health is surprisingly, Damien, one of the biggest issues that I think is going to take a lot longer than 2 years, 3 years. This is going to be a focus, certainly of mine, over the next cycle and beyond, because regional health has just been completely ignored. We're sending more and more people down to Brisbane for healthcare needs. The growing population certainly hasn't helped, particularly as the federal government allow more and more people into the country permanently. So we've got longer wait list times, particularly for elective surgery. I use that term loosely, elective, because a lot of it's critical surgery, but people are stuck on this wait list for years now. We've had instances where, like, a 9-year-old girl has been stuck on a waiting list for 7 years to get her tonsils removed.
Oh my God.
Category 2. So
7 years.
7 years.
That's just profound incompetence. That is inexcusable. Mate, we are out of time, but thanks so much for joining us. So thank you for correcting me also. 93 candidates you've got running in this election. So there is a One Nation candidate in every single seat in Queensland. James Ashby, the leader of the party in Queensland, running in the Central Queensland seat of Keppel. James, thanks so much for your time again.
Thanks, Damien.
So One Nation's a great option if you're Conservative. They've got a candidate in every electorate, and now also we have the Libertarian Party, formerly the Liberal Democrats. They're taking a more focused strategy for this particular state election, putting candidates in 4 seats across Queensland, the ones that they think they can win so they can channel their resources. The Libertarian Party candidate for the Brisbane electorate of Clayfield, which is an inner city electorate that has been a long LNP stronghold for the incumbent Tim Nichols. Some people a little bit unhappy with a bit of what they say is a lacklustre performance from Mr. Nichols. Looking for an alternative? You've got one, and he's right in the studio with me today. Great to have you here, Nick Buick. Welcome.
Thanks a lot, Damien. Thanks for having us.
So, Nick, for you and for the Libertarian Party, the state election, it's a lot of work. You've decided to go with a focused strategy on a few seats. Why is a seat in inner Brisbane like Clayfield one that you think you can win?
Well, I live in the area, so I know a lot about Clayfield. I know a lot of people in the area. I've lived there for decades, and I want to represent our party there to people that I'm connected with in an area that I'm connected with.
Great. And what do you see as the main issues? We've heard a lot in this election about health, about crime, but you've got some local issues that are particularly important to you.
That's right, yeah. You know, we've got the Olympics coming up, and there is a privately funded Olympic Stadium project for the seat of Clayfield. So it's happening in Hamilton North Shore. That's the master plan where it's focused. So obviously it's a local issue for us, and I'm campaigning on that. To me, I see that as a metaphor for the way that the LNP have abandoned business and abandoned their principles. They're backing government-funded plans that are inferior, in my opinion.
Well, they've really been accused of just playing this election small target strategy, Labor light, right?
That's right.
They're not really standing up for classical liberal, traditional liberal values, which is what the Libertarian Party sort of come in to try to do. Tell me a little bit about the Olympic plan for the stadium, which is right in your electorate. You've got a very good private enterprise plan that won't cost taxpayers too much money.
Correct.
As an opposition to the public plans, which everyone's worried will cost too much, right?
Yeah, so there's a consortium comprised of engineers, architects, planners and financiers that have, off their own bat, spent the last 6 months putting together a master plan on a 150 hectare vacant site sitting, or predominantly vacant site, sitting in Hamilton on the river there. And the plan includes an Olympic stadium, obviously. It's a 60,000 to 85,000 seat stadium.
Wow.
There is a South Bank style parkland. There's 12,000 residences. There is a fisherman's wharf, boardwalks. There's a bridge to Bulimba. There's footpath connectivity and bikeway connectivity. There's a rail extension, so it's got train connectivity, bus, metro, and connectivity to the gateway as well.
Nick, are you saying that private enterprise can do things better than the government can?
Exactly.
My goodness.
It's exactly right. So yeah, they've got $6.3 billion worth of private funding sitting there ready to go.
Oh my God. Okay, really? So
Yeah.
it wouldn't cost taxpayers anything if we just took that option?
That's right, yeah. So it's a value capture. So all they ask for in return is for that 150 hectare site. They want that. I've done a costing on it. It's probably a little over $1 billion worth of land. And in return for that, we're getting $6.3 billion of private investment coming into this state and delivering some amazing infrastructure for the city of Brisbane.
Okay. And I mean, obviously when people hear property developers, they think, oh, yeah, there's something, I don't know why, but that's what they think. I mean, I guess it's got to be very transparent, very clean. These guys, though, are kind of locally connected even to Clayfield, the electorate area of that area of Brisbane itself, right?
Yeah, the NRA Collab, who are the architect firm that have designed the master plan, that's headed up by Dr. Noel Robinson. He's an incredible architect. He's designed half the skyline of Brisbane.
Oh, really? Okay.
So very qualified, and you know he lives within Clayfield. But as far as sites go, there aren't too many sites that are that close to the city and the airport that could accommodate a plan like that. So,
and God forbid we should let anybody who actually knows what they're doing do stuff right in our cities. And actually, I mean, it'd be wonderful for Brisbane. This is impacting all of Australia. This, you know, how the face that we're going to put for the Olympics. I'm feeling pretty positive and optimistic that we're going to do a fantastic job because Brisbane is a very beautiful and amazing city. But we've got to take advantage of the talent we've got, and it ain't in government, I'm telling you.
No, that's right.
In this town.
I mean, Brisbane has the population of Chicago. We are a world-class city, and I feel like the rest of the world hasn't realised that yet. And the Olympics is an opportunity to put Brisbane on the map and bring it to the world's attention. And I don't want to see that opportunity wasted or squandered.
No, and that's in the interest of all of Australia as well. Nick, thanks for coming in. Nice to meet you face to face. I've heard your name around since you've been running. So good luck in the election. I hope you do really, really, really well. You maybe even knock Tim Nichols off and teach the passive Liberals a lesson, perhaps.
I'll do my best.
Good on you, mate. And thanks for taking. I know what effort and personal sacrifice it takes to run in an election for a minor party, and the amount of effort that you have to put in. So you know, as a fellow Aussie, thank you for doing that for Australia. So Nick Buick is the man if you happen to live in Brisbane in the electorate of Clayfield, or if you know anybody who does, if you want some common sense back in government in the Queensland Parliament. There you go. That sounded almost like an election ad. I probably have to do one of those little, what is it, the fast thing at the end where they say, you know, written and authorised by. Absolutely not. This is an independent show. All right. Thank you, Nick. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks
We'll
so
be
much,
back in a sec.
Damien. Cheers.
And that's all for this week. On the other side, your weekly analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. Please remember to tell your friends about the show. Also do please follow us on X and YouTube. And we're now back on TikTok too. Watch out for our new shorts on YouTube also. Please smash like and subscribe. Smash all those buttons. Every other button that you can find on any platform that you can. It all helps with the algorithms if you really want to support us. Also tell your friends about the show. That's absolutely the best way to do it. Very simple. They just go to YouTube and type in Other Side Australia. Other Side Australia, and it'll take them to our channel, or they can just go to @OtherSideAus. We drop a new show every Friday night at 7, Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time. If you're watching on YouTube, to make sure that you never miss our content, please hit the subscribe and the button with the little bell on it. That'll notify you when we post new content. And don't forget about our new website, othersidetv.com.au. Othersidetv.com.au. Sign up, join us. You can sign up to the exclusive side, which is very inclusive, for as little as $5 a month, or you can just sign up for free so we can keep in touch. I'm Damien Curry. Bye for now.